So, me and my buddy Todd run a small label called Vibrancy. We are pretty small and we get about like 5 to 10 demos a day sometimes. And that is a ton of demos. And I'm thinking about it and I'm like, man, if we're getting that many demos, how many demos is like someone like Tool Room or Defected or some of these major labels? How many demos a day are they getting?
Diamond chain looking like Ice Age. Yeah.
Today, we're talking all about labels. People all the time are asking me, how do I get my music signed on labels? And I think in 2023, it's harder than ever because there's so many people out there producing some really high quality killer music. And so, you really have to stand out from the pack. Your music does really need to be next level. It needs to be exactly sort of the style and the taste that specific label is looking for. And your sound needs to also align completely with their vision. Not only your sound, but your whole image and brand and identity. You got to be locked in with what they want. But the bright side about that is there are so many labels out there these days that I'm sure, can find one that is going to be the right fit for you. And that's half the battle. So my first step on today is going to be do some research the right labels to send your music to. One thing that I recommend is start with the big labels, your dream labels, your goal labels. Look at some other artists that have released on that label and then see what other labels that artist has released on. Kind of go back in history and see where they started and see sort of their path. And oftentimes you'll find a bunch of artists that have all kind of followed a similar trajectory. And there's a lot of smaller tastemaker labels out there that are good stepping stones and good sort of first platforms to get your foot through the door and get some notoriety and get some releases out there. Do some research on what style of music these labels are releasing. Do they just release one very, very, very specific style, or do they release a bunch of different styles? Do they release only bigger established artists, or are they open to signing brand new newcomers? Try and find the label that is going to fit for you at your current moment in time, right? If you're just starting out, find a label that's going to work with artists that are just starting out. If you have already had a handful of releases under your belt and you're reaching for more, then keep pushing for bigger labels. But realize, man, you really got to stand out and you got to be exceptional and be exactly what they're looking for. And so by sending your music to labels that are going to work in your genre and that are going to you are what they are looking for, that's what you want to present yourself as. So do a ton of research. And reaching out to some other artists that have already released on that label is invaluable. That is like some major, major gold because you can get so much info out of them. You can find out who the A&R is. You can find out, are they open to signing releases right now? Are they, maybe their schedule is really, really backed up, or maybe they're like, oh yeah, no, send them demos. Here's the stuff, so reaching out to other artists that have already released on the label that you're trying to reach out on and getting some more information on that label is going to, really help you in preparing an awesome demo package. And it's going to help you, ultimately, hopefully lead to some success. That's what we're doing out here. Oh, and while you're doing this research, I recommend seeing if they have some Discord servers or Instagram channels or some communities that this label is involved in. Maybe they throw parties in your city. Maybe they throw parties in another city. Try and really get involved with this label and be part of their community and be part of their ethos that they're putting out into the world. And if you become like a super active member in their community, of course, they're going to be so much more eager to work with you in the future because they know that you get down with the vision and you're a part of the scene and they know what you're about. So don't underestimate the power of community. All right, step number 2, let's go. Okay, step number 2, a lot of people don't do this and I think it's super, super important. After you've kind of picked a few labels that you want to send your music to, revisit the music. Take a listen to a bunch of music that they've released and then listen to your song, maybe download some songs that they've released and bring them into Ableton or whatever DAW you're working in and A/B compare them to your music. Is your music up to par? Is the mix and master up to par? And if the mix and master is not up to par, what can you do to get it up to par? Do you keep working on it and keep, trying to get the mix and master sounding great? Or do you want to, maybe hire somebody else to kind of bring it that extra distance and get it there? I think you really should be sending out tunes that are as finished as possible. Maybe the label might pay for a master in the end if they think it needs it, but don't bank on that and try to give them the best product you can, because if you don't, there is somebody else out there that is, So put the work into that mix and master. Make sure that the track is super, super DJable, super playable. I recommend putting it on a USB or whatever DJ software you're using and DJing it with a bunch of other tracks, making sure that it mixes really well with other tunes and plays really well with other tunes. And if it doesn't, maybe go back and revisit it. Maybe the intro's too short or the intro's too long or the vocal comes in at the right time or the wrong time. Make this tune the one that mixes in so perfectly that every DJ is going to be wanting to play it. And hey, speaking of that, send your tunes out. Then, you don't need to wait for these tunes to get signed to be sending out to your DJ friends. And so say you send it out to some DJ friends and they're all playing it. This is even more ammo for you to say, hey, label, such and such, this track's already being supported by blah, 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 blah on these stages. Like, here's some video, check it out. If the track's already being played out and it's getting some support and people are loving it, then the labels are going to be that much more interested. So really work on your music and make sure that the music is a perfect fit for that specific label. Send it out to some people, get some people's feedback and say, hey, like, if you just heard this song, like, which label do you think it might fit on? And then be really, really, really honest with yourself if you think it's up to their standards and up to their par. A/B compare it to a bunch of the tracks that they've released and really try to get it up to that level and that standard. That is so key, because at the end of the day, the music is number one. Oh, and to further touch on the music, I think it's really important that you be very clear and upfront about sampling in your music. Does your music contain any samples that might not get cleared, or is it all royalty free and it all came from sample packs? If you're a smaller artist, I almost recommend trying to maybe avoid sampling bigger tunes, because a lot of bigger labels aren't going to want to take the risk trying to clear a sample from a smaller artist where they might not be sure if that track is going to really, really crush or perform super, super well. And so even just by having a track that contains an uncleared sample, they might not want to sign it just because of that. So I do recommend trying to find original vocals or original samples and try to avoid sampling while you're getting started. Just because, sometimes those labels might not want to clear those samples. Now, maybe when you send out a pack, you include, 3 tracks that are totally fine and don't have any samples, and maybe one that does. But I think it's really important that you're clear and upfront with this from the get-go, and understand that, sometimes a label might not want to take a chance trying to clear a song with a sample when, again, you got to think they have 10 other demos that are just as good that don't have samples, and they don't have to go through that whole sample clearing process, because it is a hassle and can be expensive and time consuming and a whole pain in the ass. All right, step 3 is research how that specific label likes to receive demos. Do they have just a demo email that they actually open and check? Do they have a demo drop form on their website, or do they just have an A&R that is on the ground searching around, maybe in the DMs, listening to tunes that way? The best way to do this is try and find some people that have either sent demos to this label before and had a response or had some success, or some other artists that have already released on this, or other managers that have worked with artists that have released on this. Oftentimes you might message a artist and the artist, maybe is too cool for school and doesn't want to respond to their DMs, or maybe they're just too busy and they just get flooded. I know me, my DMs get flooded sometimes, and sometimes I just don't have the time to respond to everybody. But maybe there's a manager out there of an artist, and oftentimes managers are the ones that are sending demos anyways. So maybe reach out to them and be like, hey, how does this specific label like to receive demos? Maybe their A&R is actually responsive on Instagram, and you can just say, hey, just send them a quick DM on Instagram and let them know that you're sending some demos and whatnot, and try and build a personal touch and a personal connection. But also at the same time, maybe they hate that. And that's also super important to know too. Maybe you reach out to somebody and you're like, hey, what's the best way of getting some demos to those guys over at Tool Room? And they're like, whatever you do not DM Mark Knight. Like, he hates that. He hates getting DMs, So it's important to, before you do send a DM like that, is to make sure that they actually are responsive that way, and they enjoy receiving messages like that, because it could also backfire. So it's just important to realize, how does this specific label like to receive demos? All right. And then once you figure all that out, we're moving on to step 4. We're building the playlist. It's important. Let's go. Okay. Step 4, build the playlist. So I recommend trying to send more than one tune. If you're sending just one track at a time, it might be tough to get that one track signed. But if you send a pack of 4, 5, 6 tracks, then the label will know a couple things. One, they'll know that you're reliable and you're prolific and you have more than one track. And maybe they want to hear, like, if we're just going to do one song, we want to know that this guy's legit and he's got a bunch of other dope tunes coming up. You also want to give them some selection. You want to increase your odds of getting signed, right? And so by including a few more tracks, you're doing that. Now, it's important not to overwhelm them. I would recommend sending a maximum of 6 tracks, and that's kind of on the higher end. If you can do 4 or 5, that's probably better. And pick your best of your best that you think are going to fit for that label. But then also, maybe your best includes a track that might be a little bit of an outlier, maybe not exactly what you think the label might like, but it's kind of sort of in their world. You wouldn't believe how many times I've sent a demo pack and the label came back and they were like, oh, we want this one. And that one been the one that I didn't expect them to want at all. Labels have surprised me. I can think of at least 3 occasions of them picking tracks that I didn't think were in their wheelhouse, and I wasn't even really going to send to them in the first place. So sometimes you got to include those if you really think they're really strong and they're really great tracks. Include them along. Whatever you do, make sure that however you send them, people can click the link and click play right away. So I recommend SoundCloud private links with downloads enabled. Make sure that you can download the file and make sure that file that downloads has your name in it, your artist name, the title, track name, all that stuff, because you wouldn't believe the amount of tracks that I've downloaded from SoundCloud demos. I've had the file on my computer, I drag it into my record box, and it doesn't have an artist name, and then I have no idea who wrote the song. It happens all the time. Make sure you're labeling all that stuff. Make sure that your playlist that you make looks super pro and super professional, and that it's not just like version 8, version 33. Like, try and make it look legit, like you care, and because you do care, and you have to care. You got to be as professional as you can. Maybe you make up a little artwork for that label. Maybe you write it in the description, some more information about the tracks. Really try to take yourself seriously, because this playlist is how you got to present yourself, and you got to present yourself the best, because these labels are getting, maybe 50 demos a day. You got to stand out. So yeah, to recap, SoundCloud, Dropbox, Disco, all great. I don't recommend WeTransfer. I don't do that. Avoid WeTransfer, because some of them would need to open up their computer and download the file. I just want to click a link on my phone wherever I am at that moment and just hit play. All right. So, and make sure that they can download the file too. Super important. All right, moving on. Step 5. So the weeks leading up to you sending these demos, I recommend being active on socials. Really try to update all that stuff. Update your press pics. Try and maybe make some fun content. Try and just stay active and let people know that you're out there and that you're taking yourself seriously. That is the biggest thing that you want to demonstrate right here, is that you are taking yourself seriously. You're putting in the effort and you're putting in the work, and you're being active on social media on a various number of platforms, and you're really putting yourself out there, and you're trying to build as an artist. Labels love seeing this. And if you're doing this the weeks leading up before you send the demo, and then you send the demo and you stay active, the following weeks after, you want that A&R to, stumble on your page and say, damn, this dude's putting in the work and they got great music. This person's really killing it. This person's dope. I'm going to get behind the project. I'm here. I see the vision. I see where they're headed. I see what they're up to. I support this. I want to sign this track. That is ultimately what you want to do. What you want to convince these people of is that you're the real deal and you are worth investing in. So take yourself seriously. If you're out there and you're just sending demos and you're like, well, I'm not getting anywhere because the labels won't sign my tracks, and the labels won't sign my tracks, and so I have nothing to post about, and blah, 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 and you're just a downer, then, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. You got to get out there and do the work yourself. No one's going to do it for you. And if labels aren't signing you, who cares? Just keep putting out the music and building an audience and taking yourself seriously, and they will come as long as you just keep pushing forward and keep improving and keep always working on yourself. Okay, step 6. Finally, we're ready to send it out. Okay, so let's think about it. We want to keep the email or the message short and sweet and concise, but you also want to make sure that all your information is there, at least that they have the file available to download, that your social links are there, that you tell them a little bit about the track. You don't need to go on and be like, I started producing at the age of 12 and I knew music was going to be my destiny, blah, blah, blah. No, don't do any of that. I think all you really need to be is like, hey, passing along some tunes for consideration on the label. I'm a big fan of such and such because I think, it's got a bunch of energy and, hope you guys like it. You can keep it really, really short and sweet. You can try and tell a little bit about the story. You can include information about, the samples you used or didn't use. Maybe you write, hey, all the vocals are royalty free, so they're good to go right now. You don't need to worry about sample clearance. I think you should be upfront about all that stuff. You don't need to be silly. Try not to seem super desperate, or at the same time, try not to seem, super nonchalant. You just want to be nice and friendly and presentable and keep it short and sweet. And that's about it. Try not to overthink it. And then step number 7 is wait. And this is probably the hardest part because you do got to wait. And sometimes you got to wait a while. I've had labels come back, 6 months after me actually sending demos and say, you know what, we like this one, we're going to sign it. And I was like, what? Is it 6 months later out of the blue they hit me up? So, it can take a long time because a lot of these labels are getting overwhelmed with how many demos they're getting to. And, maybe eventually they do get to your track and they're like, you know what, this one's sweet, So I would recommend waiting at least 2 weeks before you follow up. And don't be afraid to follow up. It doesn't hurt to send a little reminder, a little follow up, but don't seem super needy. And I wouldn't be following up, more than 2 or 3 times, after that, over the span of say like 6 months, 2 or 3 times, like give these people some time because they are overwhelmed. And, eventually if you still aren't hearing back or you're following, it's good to check SoundCloud stats too, right? Because then you can see if a label has listened to it, right? You can go into stats and say, oh, look, they listened to it like a week ago. Maybe then you might want to follow up. And it's good to try and say, hey, like it's all good if you want to pass on this. I just want to know because I want to send it elsewhere. And if that's the case, then they might respond sometimes quicker. Because sometimes maybe labels are just hemming and hawing about it, and they're like, don't have the time, or it's not right the style, or whatever. And maybe they're just taking a while just to get back to you, even though they might already have an answer. So yeah, don't be afraid to follow up, but give it some time and only follow up a couple times. If you do get rejected in the end, don't stress too much. Most of the time, when say I'm rejecting demos at Vibrancy, it's not even because the tune's not great. It's just because it's not the right time or not the right style, or we already have a bunch of other releases planned. There could be a million other reasons why your track didn't get signed. So just keep on trying and keep on sending demos. We recently signed a track from a buddy who he probably had sent us maybe 15 demos before we signed the track that he did. And eventually we found one that worked, and I'm so stoked that it's out there into the world. So don't give up. Keep pushing yourself forward. Keep pushing your music forward. Keep involving yourself in the community and taking yourself seriously. Make sure that your music is all mixed and mastered to the brim, and you are laughing. That's all you really need, and you're going to be set. Okay, that's about it. Okay, bye.